Have you ever lived through a moment like this? She walks up and embraces you, just for a few seconds. No words, no explanations. Yet everything within that embrace, from the warmth of her arms to the silence between your breaths, poses a quiet question. How should I respond without breaking this moment? Most of us, in that instant, let emotions take the reins. Confusion, anticipation, sometimes even the naive hope that the embrace holds a whole future. But what truly lingers in her memory isn't some grand gesture. It's the way you chose not to act. There is a paradox here. The less you strive, the deeper the impression you leave. The more still you are, the more unforgettable you become. And none of this is a tactic for seduction. It is the byproduct of a way of life, a force from within, a philosophy which, if lived rightly, turns even the smallest moments into invisible bonds of connection. Stoicism. 1. A hug is not just emotion. It's a test of who you are. In human interaction, there exists a form of language that transcends speech, ethnicity, even culture, the language of the body. Among all nonverbal expressions, a hug is one of the most direct and sincere forms of emotional connection. Yet few recognize that a hug is not merely a gesture of affection or concern. It is, in essence, a subtle test that reveals far more about who you are than any words you might say afterward. In that fleeting moment when two bodies meet, what's conveyed isn't surface-level things like clothing, posture, or scent. What the other person senses, whether consciously or not, is the energy emanating from your inner state. You might try to appear calm, but if inside you're anxious, confused, or craving something, that feeling will seep through every motion, every breath, every seemingly unconscious touch. In the realm of emotional communication, the body never lies. Most people, especially women, who often possess a heightened emotional intuition, can immediately detect inner imbalance if the person before them isn't centered. They don't need to reason it out. It's an intuitive knowing, much like walking into a room and sensing that something is off. In a hug, if you're not truly present, if your mind is in the future, worrying about what's next, or stuck in the past, comparing it to someone else, the other person will feel that dissonance, like a break in the flow of connection. Conversely, when a man enters a hug with mental stability, full presence, no urgency, no hidden agenda, no need to prove anything, his stillness becomes a quiet force of gravity. The other person feels like they are being embraced by a tree in the wind, a place to lean into, relax, and feel safe. No tension, no performance, only genuine presence, unvarnished. And here's the paradox. A hug doesn't require you to do anything to be attractive. In fact, the truest form of magnetism arises not from action, but from simply being. Being exactly who you are, with a composed mind and a body unshaken by pressure or desire. In Stoicism, this is ataraxia, the inner tranquility untouched by external noise. When you hug someone from this state, the gesture ceases to be social habit. It becomes a mirror of a soul that is free and rooted. That's why some people, just by standing still and embracing lightly, leave behind warmth that lingers. They don't need fancy words or dramatic gestures. It's the quiet and stability of their mind that flows into the shared space of the hug, creating an energy field others want to remain in. Not because they try to impress, but because their lack of needing to impress becomes the most enduring impression. Biologically, psychological studies have shown that physical contact, like hugging, activates the parasympathetic nervous system, lowering heart rate, reducing blood pressure, and creating a sense of safety. But this effect only emerges fully when the hug comes from someone whose energy is calming, not invasive, not rushed. Those with psychological unrest, even mild anxiety or excessive anticipation, often make others feel suffocated when hugging, without even realizing they're transmitting that. So, a hug becomes an invisible but sharp test of a man's composure. It doesn't merely test surface-level confidence, but something deeper: inner stability, energetic control, and especially emotional self-governance. A hug doesn't demand perfection, nor does it require you to be successful in someone's eyes. It only asks that you be there, truly there, as yourself, not as a version trying to win approval. Not everyone passes this test. Many men, despite physical attractiveness or smooth speech, still leave an emptiness behind when they hug. That's because they're not present. Their minds are elsewhere, performing, worrying, or desperate for validation. Meanwhile, the man whose hug slows time and silences the room, that's someone who has reached a degree of inner stillness. He seeks nothing from the moment, and in doing so, becomes the very thing that is sought. From this, we see clearly, a hug isn't merely an intimate act. It's a subconscious metric of your entire emotional and spiritual structure. It reveals whether you're truly living or just reacting, whether you're anchored or ruled by unmet needs. And to those who can see, a hug is where your true essence is most plainly felt, not through words, not through titles, but in the feeling you leave when you say nothing at all. At first glance, a hug may seem like a fleeting social act, lasting only seconds, offered in greeting, shared emotion, or affection. But in philosophy and psychology, that moment contains far more layers, especially between man and woman, where emotions often hide behind action. A hug becomes a brief instant filled with psychological signals, latent expectations, and above all, a test of a person's inner depth. Stoicism, which focuses on emotional mastery and inner control, does not view events through external values, but sees them as tests of spiritual maturity. By this view, every situation in life, no matter how small, is a chance to demonstrate clarity of judgment and steadiness of spirit. And a hug, even one that lasts only a few seconds, may well be one of the clearest tests of self-mastery. The issue isn't in the nature of the hug, but in the mindset behind how it's received. When a man is embraced by a woman, his reaction reveals not just a passing emotion, but a direct mirror of his inner life. Is he in control of his mind, or ruled by emotions, desires, and fears? This isn't just a philosophical question. It's a question of character and will. If he reacts impulsively, clutching tightly, trying to prolong the moment, or fumbling as if afraid to ruin it, it's clear he isn't in control. He's allowing emotion to dictate his behavior, and it shows immediately in his body language. It's a clear signal that his inner state is unstable, or being swayed by the hope that the hugs might be something more. On the other hand, if he responds slowly with restraint, neither hesitant nor eager to dominate the moment, it shows he places himself as the observer, not the reactor. This is a core Stoic principle. Do not overreact to any event, but observe and respond in alignment with reason and virtue, not fleeting emotion. The moment of the hug requires no words, but demands an inner decision. That decision isn't made in speech, but in breath control, the steadiness of hands, the posture of the body, and especially the regulation of the heart and state of awareness. If a man can hold his mind still, not slipping into imagined futures or questions like, "Does she like me?" or "What happens after this?" then he has passed a fundamental Stoic test, the discipline of thought that grounds one in the present. Psychologically, a man's natural reaction when physically close to a woman is often sympathetic arousal. Faster heartbeat, rapid breathing, a flutter of nerves. This is a primal readiness for intimacy. But the ability to modulate the nervous system, shifting into parasympathetic calm, is the biological signature of emotional discipline. When this happens during a hug, it creates a mirroring effect. The woman senses that peace and instinctively attunes her state to match. This leads to an important truth. Even if the hug lasts only seconds, its echo may linger in the other's mind for years, even forever. Not because the hug itself was technically superior, but because the feeling it left was unmistakably different. No pressure, no tension, no need, just full presence, unbound. That is the power of someone whose inner life is strong. They don't just pass through moments, they elevate them into experiences worth remembering. In Stoicism, every action in daily life is viewed as a form of ethical practice. This means that even the smallest acts, eating, walking, greeting, conversing, or hugging, become tools for cultivating virtue, humility, emotional restraint, and firmness of mind. A hug is no exception. It is where a man chooses to be ruled by emotion or to turn the moment into a practice of reason and presence. And that choice, made in seconds, shapes how a woman perceives you, not just then, but in the days, weeks, even years to come. What lingers is not your clothes or what you said, but the feeling you left in that intimate instant. That's why the hug, seemingly brief, becomes a long-term test of who you are. It is not merely a test of emotional maturity, but a marker of whether one lives by a solid value system and is capable of true presence. To a woman, the hug is sometimes a scanner, a moment in which she sees, not through your words or follow-up actions, but right then and there, whether the man she's embracing is someone worth a deeper connection. And that test, unannounced, without questions, without clear answers, is always felt. 2. Don't seek meaning. Respond with the truth of who you are. In human interaction, especially between man and woman, most real connection doesn't come from words, but from nonverbal cues, eye contact, posture, distance, and especially physical touch, among which the hug is the most common and easily misinterpreted. The moment a woman initiates or responds to a hug, a man's mind can quickly fall into interpretation. Does she like me? Is this just friendly or something more? Should I lean in or pull back? These questions often arise instantly, so quickly that one doesn't even notice that they're interpreting, not feeling. Reading another person's emotions is a biological mechanism developed for survival and social adaptation. Humans are wired to read facial expressions, shifts in tone, and body language to gauge the attitudes and intentions of others. But in modern times, where social interaction is complicated by expectations, norms, and gender roles, this analysis often becomes a source of anxiety, doubt, and disconnection. In a close moment like a hug, If a man immediately slips into interpreting the woman's feelings, his next action will no longer come from presence or authenticity, but from a string of assumptions, usually inaccurate and shaped by personal desire. Instead of letting the mind and body melt into the moment, he uses intellect to control something meant to be natural and emotional. The result is a hug that feels insincere, forced, and often counterproductive. Stoicism, grounded in the ability to distinguish what lies within and beyond our control, teaches that others' thoughts, emotions, and reactions are not ours to govern. To spend time, energy, and attention trying to read someone else, especially in something as simple as a hug, is not only futile, but also disruptive to our inner state. Trying to decode others doesn't bring us closer to them. It pulls us further from ourselves. In modern psychology, the tendency to constantly read others, especially in ambiguous social situations, often leads to a condition called anticipatory anxiety. The mind enters a mode of constant readiness, analyzing and predicting every possible scenario. In this state, the sympathetic nervous system is overactivated, leading to chronic stress, emotional disconnection, and an impaired ability to truly feel the present. Moreover, the trap of decoding others weakens the authenticity of our actions. When a man acts based on what he thinks will make an impression or fit the moment, instead of what aligns with its values, that action becomes performance, not presence. And while this might go unnoticed intellectually, others often sense something off, something untrue. And that disconnect undermines trust. Another consequence of constant emotional decoding is the inflation of unrealistic expectations. If a man believes a hug signals affection or romantic potential, his following actions become shaped by that expectation. When reality doesn't meet it, negative emotions follow: disappointment, frustration, even anger. These emotions don't arise from the hug itself, but from the meaning he invented and clung to. By contrast, Stoic philosophy offers a clear remedy. Act according to what you control, yourself, and let everything else unfold as it will. A Stoic doesn't seek meaning in someone else's feelings during a hug. He simply remains present, experiences the moment, and lets it pass without attachment or expectation. That inner freedom not only grants him peace, but radiates calm to others, something rare in a world full of people trying to decode and win each other. In relationships, lasting magnetism doesn't come from guessing others' emotions, but from mastering one's state in every situation. The less one is caught in overthinking, the more one holds quiet presence, the more one emits an energy that others want to be near, not because he understood anything, but because he didn't need to. He simply showed up, anchored in his truth. In the end, the effort to find hidden meaning behind someone's hug, glance, or words often leads to emotional instability and disconnection. The trap is this: the more you try to understand, the more you drift from presence. The more you analyze, the more you lose authenticity. Stoicism teaches that the wisest stance in interaction is to let go of needing to know what others are thinking and instead ask, am I living in accordance with my own values? A hug, received with clarity and without expectation, is no longer something to decode, but a quiet test of presence, composure, and spiritual depth. And in that simplicity lies the most powerful and lasting form of connection. The idea of a natural reaction is often misunderstood as an impulsive act, devoid of reason. Many assume a genuine response is one driven by raw emotion, like suddenly hugging back, trembling, or speaking instantly after being embraced. But in philosophy, especially in Stoicism, natural doesn't mean impulsive. It means shaped by long-standing discipline and inner balance. A truly natural reaction requires no strain, yet is not governed by primitive impulse. It's the result of a well-prepared inner life, where one is not easily disturbed by the external and can act consistently with core values, even in emotionally charged moments like a hug. In Stoic thought, internal preparation is a path. Philosophers like Epictetus emphasize that to reach spiritual firmness, one must practice daily introspection, questioning oneself, reflecting on behavior, and constantly distinguishing between what is and isn't under one's control. When this habit is practiced long enough, it fosters the ability to act, not from impulse, but from principled intent. When a man is hugged, especially in a setting charged with emotion or intimacy, if he hasn't trained himself to observe and manage his emotions, he'll be steered by instinct. His body will react with a surge in heartbeat, quick breath, muscle tension, and feelings of excitement or anxiety. These responses are biologically natural, but they needn't be outwardly expressed. Here, internal preparation acts as a subtle filter, refining raw emotional energy into behavior that is deep and appropriate. The natural reaction, in the context of a person with spiritual depth, is a sequence of actions or silence marked by stability, awareness, and freedom from expectation. He may return the hug with just the right firmness, not too strong, not too faint. He may remain silent rather than rush to fill space with words. Everything that happens in that state flows naturally, not from unfiltered instinct, but from practiced awareness. Modern psychology echoes this in the idea of self-regulation. Those who self-regulate aren't suppressing emotion. They're aware of it. They pause between stimulus and response, and they choose reactions aligned with their values and the situation. This skill isn't innate, it's trained through mindfulness, reflection, and intentional experience. Building a natural response through inner preparation also helps shape identity. In Stoicism, to live with virtue is to live with selfhood. One who acts through reason and virtue won't be led by emotions, positive or negative. Instead, every action passes through the lens of reason, with the central question, does this reflect the person I'm striving to be? When a man enters a hug with this mindset, his actions aren't reactions. They are expressions of a life aligned with principle. One expression of this natural response is the ability to hold intentional stillness. After a hug, someone unprepared internally may feel a sudden emptiness, needing to say something, do something, or chase a next step to keep connection. The trained person feels no such urge. He allows the moment to settle and accepts the silence as part of the experience. This capacity to let things pass without grasping is the clearest sign of deep internal strength. From a sociological view, someone who reacts naturally through inner preparation fosters emotional safety for others, especially in male-female dynamics that plays a key role in trust building. Women, highly attuned to emotional undercurrents, quickly notice when a man is driven by a need to be liked or validated. These reactions, however subtle, reveal inner instability. But when actions come from a man already settled within, his calm doesn't need words. It simply signals safety, steadiness, and sincerity. This inner readiness need not be shaped in similar scenarios. A man who can respond naturally in a hug is one who has practiced stillness across varied settings, in rejection, in criticism, in uncertainty, in waiting. These experiences forge a capacity not to react impulsively, but to respond with chosen clarity. Over time, this becomes a new natural, where action and essence are one. Ultimately, a natural response is not an instinctive one. It is the highest expression of refined inner control. A person with a truly natural response doesn't overthink, doesn't rehearse, and yet what he does is right, fitting, and deep, because within, he has a structure strong enough to navigate without effort. In a world tossed by emotion and instability, such a response is living proof of a mind that is disciplined, resolute, and dignified. 3. A hug is a mirror. It reflects the state of your inner life. In human communication, language accounts for only a small fraction of what is truly conveyed. Most understanding between people happens not through words, but through nonverbal signals. Eye contact, gestures, distance, posture, facial expressions, and especially physical touch. Among these, a hug, though it may last only seconds, has the power to reveal the entire inner world of a person. This is no accident, but the natural result of the deep bond between the mind and the body. A connection long studied in both classical philosophy and modern psychology. According to research in nonverbal behavior, the body does not lie. Even when someone chooses silence or tries to appear composed, their true emotional state leaks through subtle shifts in movement, posture, and expression. In a hug, the entire nervous system is activated, especially the autonomic system, including both the sympathetic and parasympathetic branches. When emotions surge, the sympathetic system accelerates the heart, shortens the breath, and tenses the body. And every micro shift in this state is transmitted through the hug, wordless yet unmistakable. That is why a person whose inner life is in turmoil, grappling with anxiety, longing, or tension, will unavoidably show it in the way they hug. They may hold on too tightly, as if afraid to lose the moment, or pull away too quickly, unable to bear the closeness. Perhaps there's a hesitant grip, averted eyes, or a rushed, retreating touch, all signs that reflect inner conflict. The other person, especially someone with sharp intuition, will sense this immediately, even if they cannot explain it. By contrast, a hug from someone with mental composure feels completely different. No rushing, no strain, no hesitation, just a smooth, timely, balanced gesture, carried by the energy of full presence. This body isn't tensed or performative. It simply reflects a quiet, grounded center, steady breath, calm heartbeat, and perhaps a gentle gaze or silence afterward. These all give the feeling of truth, ease, and clarity, without the need for explanation. In social psychology, this phenomenon is explained by the concept of emotional leakage, the involuntary release of emotions. While we may learn to control our expressions and words, intense emotions tend to escape through subtle actions, hand movement, body angle, or the distance we hold. A hug, with its physical intimacy, is the perfect stage for such signals to surface. And because no one can manage every detail in that fleeting moment, the body must tell the truth. The mind cannot. From the Stoic perspective, this confirms a core principle. One cannot pretend to be calm if the mind has not been trained into calmness. Stoicism doesn't promote emotional suppression, but rather emotional regulation from within, not through social skill or charm, but through mastery of self. When a man hugs someone, his state, whether stable or scattered, will be revealed, nearly unfiltered, through his body. This is why a hug becomes a mirror of the self. At that exact moment, on a deeper level, a hug is not just a place where emotion leaks. It's where we find out whether someone is truly living in alignment with themselves. One can master polite speech, social etiquette, and charm, but it's almost impossible to fake a genuine hug. When bodies connect, the brain's limbic regions, like the amygdala, quickly scan for safety and truth. If there's a mismatch between words and the physical feeling of the hug, the recipient feels discomfort without knowing why. This is the cost of incoherence between speech and action, something Stoicism warns us to avoid. Consistency between inner state and outward action is what Stoic practitioners strive for. In a hug, this alignment appears when the body and its energy are led by a mind undisturbed. Nothing to prove, nothing to perform, just the authentic self, present. It won't feel dramatic or grand, but it leaves a lasting impression, creating a space of safety, stillness, and trust that few can offer. Furthermore, the way emotions are silently exposed through the body shows that a spiritually grounded person does not judge others by what they say, but by how they show up, especially in life's most ordinary moments. A person may speak confidently of kindness, composure, and self-assurance, but if their hug is shaky, awkward, or uncontrolled, all their words lose weight. The body is already told the truth, and that is why the hug becomes a silent but sharp test for anyone building inner strength. Because if that strength isn't real, it will be exposed instantly. In short, though a hug may last only seconds and involve no words, it is one of the most sincere forms of human expression. Through breath, posture, pressure, and gaze, the body reveals the full truth of one's current inner state. A person who lacks inner peace cannot mask it with appearance. A person who has cultivated composure needs no effort. Their stillness becomes magnetic. Thus, the hug becomes a mirror, wordless, unspoken, but more revealing than any sentence could be. Humans do not interact only through language. We are constantly exchanging emotional energy through gestures, space, eye contact, and behavioral rhythm. In moments of physical closeness, like a hug, this energy becomes palpable. What few realize is that the feeling one person gives to another doesn't come from what they say, but from the emotional state they transmit, unconsciously. And in meaningful interactions, especially between man and woman, the most powerful thing felt is emotional safety. Emotional safety is a key concept in modern psychology. It describes the state in which someone feels accepted, unjudged, unthreatened, and free to be themselves around another. This safety doesn't come from promises, reassurances, or persuasion. It arises from consistent presence, calmness, and the absence of pressure. A person with a stable inner world naturally radiates an energy that helps others feel relaxed and at ease. This is the energy of someone who has learned to govern himself and, as a result, has no desire to control anyone else. In a hug, if a man enters with an unsettled mind, afraid of rejection, desperate for validation, or hoping for a certain outcome, those feelings will saturate the shared space. The hug, though simple in form, becomes subtly loaded. A woman may sense something is off that she's being pushed to respond or to clarify something. Though nothing is spoken, the instability creates invisible tension that breaks the natural rhythm and disrupts connection at its deepest level. In contrast, if a man steps into that moment with a grounded mind, not needing to guess her thoughts, not calculating next steps, not hoping for anything but presence, his ease will create a field of peace. The woman in contact with that energy won't feel pressured, won't feel watched, and therefore will feel free to be herself. This is the foundation of real connection, not born from technique, but from the ability to hold a centered mind without imposing it on another. In Stoic philosophy, inner stability is among the highest expressions of reason and dignity. The ability to remain calm, even in emotionally charged situations, is not detachment. It is the mark of one who has trained himself deeply. When a man is undisturbed by expectation or the emotions of others, his actions, including intimate ones like a hug, become natural expressions of respect and freedom, not strategies to get something. Behavioral psychology has shown that people mirror each other emotionally, a phenomenon called emotional mirroring. We instinctively reflect the state of those around us. In the presence of anxious people, our nervous system shifts into defense. But near those who are steady, who breathe slowly, speak calmly, and hold relaxed postures, we effortlessly synchronize with their state. In a hug, this effect is even stronger. So when a man hugs with true inner stability, a woman feels enveloped in emotional safety, triggering trust, calm, and sometimes even deep emotional release. The energy of stability cannot be faked in a fleeting moment. It doesn't come from technique or posture control. It's the result of a life lived, practiced, and refined, a presence that carries weight. In philosophy, this is called the moral center, a clearly held value system, lived consistently, radiating a quiet power. It doesn't seek control, yet it gives assurance. This ability to create safety also comes from not placing hidden burdens on others in interaction. Many people, while hugging, unconsciously project messages like, "I hope you feel my affection," or "I'm offering something meaningful. Please respond." These unspoken expectations, if unmet, quickly turn into disappointment and loss of self-control. In contrast, someone grounded within does not hug to get anything. He hugs because he is present, not to impress, not to stir emotion, but to let the moment be what it is. Thus, we see that a hug, simple as it may be, is a precise measure of one's internal stability. A hug rooted in inner stillness always creates a space of safety for the other. And in a world increasingly sensitive to artificiality, restlessness, and emotional volatility, this safety becomes the clearest marker, distinguishing someone with real depth from someone merely performing. Ultimately, inner stability cannot be faked. It doesn't come from surface behavior, but from strength built over time, through experience, self-awareness, and observation. When that level is reached, a man no longer needs to try to create safety for others, because his presence, his breath, his movement already assures it. At that point, the hug ceases to be formality. It becomes a subtle expression of a soul that is ordered, intentional, and capable of bringing peace into the shared space. 4. Silence is the strongest weapon. In human interaction, especially during emotionally intimate moments like a hug, there exists a common but often misjudged phenomenon: silence. Most people are conditioned by society to see silence as awkwardness, confusion, or lack of finesse. When an emotional moment has just passed, there is a tendency to fill the ensuing silence with words, a comment, a joke, or a forced gesture to ease the tension. Yet such intervention often disrupts the very depth that moment was about to form. According to studies in interpersonal psychology, humans have a reflexive need to control uncertainty in social interaction. When two people fall into silence, especially after an emotional exchange like a hug, their brains activate risk processing and social evaluation zones. This prompts one or both to quickly act, filling the gap. But that space, if allowed to remain naturally, is precisely where emotion is digested, absorbed, and settles into deep resonance. In Stoic philosophy, silence is never seen as weakness or ineptitude. On the contrary, it is the sign of one who can govern their response, who isn't driven by impulsive emotion, and who understands the value of mental space following connection. A Stoic does not rush to speak to avoid misunderstanding or awkwardness. He knows that any action following a deep moment should arise from presence, not from fear of judgment. Neuroscience shows that after a meaningful emotional event, like a significant hug, the parasympathetic nervous system activates, lowering heart rate, reducing blood pressure, and inducing calm. This is when body and mind enter a state of energy synchronization. If a defensive or joking reaction interrupts too early, this process is disrupted. The forming connection is broken, replaced by awkwardness, vagueness, or forced normalcy. When someone chooses to remain silent after an emotional moment, it doesn't mean they don't know what to say. It means they are allowing the experience to be fully lived, much like the silence following a beautiful piece of music. What lingers in memory isn't the final note, but the stillness that follows. The echo of emotion, like melody, only resonates when nothing interrupts it. In the case of a hug, if a few seconds of calm silence follow, the sense of connection naturally extends, without pressure, without dilution. The psychological effect of timely silence brings what many therapists call emotional space. This is the invisible space in the mind, where one feels safe enough to process emotion without judgment or demand. After a moment of closeness, this space is essential for the other to turn inward, to feel themselves in the presence of the other. If that silence is broken by aimless words, the inner process is disrupted, and the moment is quickly relegated to something that happened but didn't stay. Silence also holds symbolic weight in nonverbal communication. In many cultures, especially Eastern and spiritual traditions, stillness is a language of deep understanding. One who remains silent after offering a sincere gesture isn't lacking in communication skills, but is using a more powerful, wordless form. They're saying, "I don't need to control your reaction. I'm here, fully present, with no need to steer." In relationships, the lasting bond isn't built on beautiful words, but on the ability to exist together in silence, without unease. This marks emotional maturity. If two people can share a meaningful moment, like a hug, and let it settle without rushing to speak, the silence becomes a foundation for unspoken connection. It communicates, "We don't need to try, because we're already safe together." In truth, many unfortunate turns in emotional interactions don't stem from wrong action, but from excessive reaction after the right one. A hug may be deeply sincere, but if followed by awkward speech, clumsy humor, or rushed topic changes, the moment becomes distorted. The other may feel let down, or worse, believe the intimacy wasn't real. Yet if silence follows the hug, just for a few seconds, the emotional weight of the act multiplies. Another crucial point: silence is not passivity. In Stoic thought, silence is an active choice, a conscious refusal to be pulled by emotion, a means to preserve reason and observation. The person who holds silence after an emotional moment is not incapable of acting, but chooses not to react hastily, ensuring that whatever comes next is chosen, not reflexive. In sum, silence after an emotional moment is not awkwardness or lack of communication skill. It is a mark of high self-mastery, a deliberate act that allows both people time to absorb the experience undisturbed. That silence deepens the moment, gives it echo, and leaves a lasting impression, not painted, not explained, but alive and enduring. True human connection doesn't form just through words. It emerges, often more powerfully, through silences created with intention and ease. In a world where talk, rapid responses, and clear displays are considered the norm of openness, people are losing the ability to coexist with stillness. Yet in deep relationships, especially when two people have just shared something emotional like a hug, post-moment silence becomes the most vital ingredient for building genuine, lasting, unforced connection. After a hug, people tend to fill the silence with a question, a joke, or an explanation, thinking it shows care or maintains energy. Yet in most cases, this quick verbal reaction interrupts the inner emotional process of the other. That moment was a real emotional stream. It needs quiet space to settle, imprint, and become connective experience. If cut off by unnecessary words, the stream dries up, and the moment passes like a clumsy gesture. From a neuroscience perspective, the human nervous system constantly seeks emotional equilibrium. When intimacy occurs, such as a meaningful hug or prolonged touch, both brains and bodies enter automatic recalibration. In this process, silence acts as a protective field where the other can define the moment's meaning, sense you freely, and choose their own response, not because they're pushed, but because they genuinely want to. When a man stays silent after an emotional act, he allows the other to engage with their own emotions in complete freedom, unburdened by expectation or the need to respond. This reflects a rare kind of energy, that of someone who needs no control, no possession, and no verbal closure. In psychology, this is known as the energy of non-interfering presence, a state where one feels accepted without being shaped. Unlike words, which can be misread, dissected, or reciprocated, silence is open communication. It imposes nothing, directs no feeling, demands no reply. Therefore, it creates the ideal space for the other to access their real emotions, free of external noise. In that space, they may ask, "Why did that moment move me? How do I feel near this person? What makes me feel safe?" When these questions arise naturally, the connection reaches a depth no words can match. Stoicism emphasizes that we are not to control others' emotions or actions, but only ourselves, especially our reactions. When someone can remain silent after a meaningful moment, it clearly shows they are not driven by the need for validation, the urge to impress, or the fear of rejection. They don't rush to conclude the moment because they know it is still unfolding inside the mind, in the emotions, in the memory of the other. From a woman's perspective, this creates a rare experience. being respected, heard without having to speak, and free to respond in her own way. This kind of freedom is rare in modern social interaction, where people often feel compelled to react, clarify emotions, or meet unspoken expectations. When a man asks nothing of her, no pressure, no interpretation, no attempt to rescue the silence, she feels empowered to sense and connect authentically. Silence also creates the perfect setting for emotional echo. Often, it's not the words but the wordless moments, a held gaze after a hug, a pause uninterrupted, that linger longest in memory. What remains is not the detail, but the feeling. And that feeling endures because it was allowed to form freely, undisturbed by interpretive speech. In deep communication, connection happens not in the words, but between them. Between a hug and a sentence, if there is a long enough pause for both to truly feel, that pause becomes the bridge where empathy is built. One who can hold such space is strong enough not to fear being forgotten, misunderstood, or unacknowledged. This also reflects a core truth in communication. Silence does not weaken connection if it arises from true presence. Someone who says nothing, but has a steady gaze, relaxed body, and calm breath, creates ease and trust. On the other hand, one who talks too much after an emotional act, even with good intent, may inadvertently make the other feel imposed upon or deprived of space to feel. Ultimately, silence after closeness is not abandonment or inaction. It is an unspoken invitation for the other to connect with themselves, and from there with you, in the most enduring and authentic way. No true bond is forged through intervention, but the one who can hold stillness, like fertile soil for emotion to take root, is the one who creates the space for genuine connection to bloom. We don't need to wait for a hug to practice what we've learned from Stoic philosophy. Each day offers countless chances to cultivate presence, self-command, and inner stillness. Whether stepping into a meeting room, talking with someone we care about, or simply sitting with the silence of our own space. I've let emotion take the reins in important moments before, rushing to speak just to fill a silence, overreacting when I couldn't read someone's feelings, or fumbling to do something in order to be remembered. In the end, I lost what mattered most, the genuine connection that only presence and freedom can offer. Since embracing Stoic principles, I've learned to pause, not from fear of error, but from a desire to let the moment live fully. When someone hugs me, I no longer rush to interpret or react. I let my body respond truthfully, unbound. Then, I hold just enough silence for us both to feel, rather than analyze. And it is that, wordless, effortless, that forms a bond deeper than any effort could. Stillness, surrender, and stable energy aren't achieved in a day. But if we begin by observing ourselves in the smallest of moments, each day brings us closer to the character of one who lives by reason, freed from expectation, not remembered for what they did, but for who they were. Thank you for walking with me on this journey into something that may seem small, a hug, but holds an entire inner world within it. If this reflection touched something in you, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss what comes next. Because each video is not just a lesson in philosophy, it's a reminder that living deeply isn't a luxury, but a choice we can make every day. And if there's one thing to carry with you after this video, let it be this: the person who lingers in memory is not the one who tries to impress, but the one so grounded that others want to return and remain. See you in the next video.